Hello there ladies, gentlemen and all variations thereupon. This week we're going to be making ourselves a fabric footstool using some thrifted fabric, an old pair of curtains and a whole bunch of packing peanuts. Should be a quick easy project. Let's see if we can get it done in just one afternoon. So this big box of packing peanuts is going to be my fill material, and obviously I can't make a fabric footstool that's going to be larger internally in terms of its internal area than the amount of packing peanuts I've got to fit it. So the first thing I need to know is what's the internal area of this. So get yourself a tape measure and measure the height, width and depth of the box, and then multiply all those together and you'll get yourself the internal volume in hopefully centimetres cubed, unless you're using freedom units. I don't know why you ever would, but then you'd have inches cubed. But I prefer using centimetres cubed because it just makes things a lot easier from my point of view. Because I'm making a footstool, there is one dimension that we know is going to be absolutely key and consistent no matter how much packing material we've got, and that is the height of the footstool. We don't want something too low because then you just essentially put your feet on the ground. You might as well just put any old cushion down there. And you don't want something too high because then it becomes awkward and you're putting too much pressure on your lower back when you are sitting in the chair. You want something at a good height, and for me, based on the chair that I'm going to put this in front of, that's 38 centimetres tall. So not that big, just enough for me to be able to put my feet up while I'm in the chair. So that measurement is set in stone, can't change that. The variable measurement is going to then be, when I'm going to make it into a cylinder, it's going to be the dimensions of the circle at the top and circle at the bottom. So when I make it into a cylinder that's 38 centimetres tall, I end up with the volume that I want. Now I have already done these calculations, and for the 38 centimetres tall footrest that I'm going to create, I'm going to have let's get my notes out, a 41 centimetre diameter circle across the top. Now if you've paid attention in your geometry class at school, you will know how to exactly calculate all the dimensions that you need for this cylinder. However, if you haven't taken that class yet, if you're quite young, or if you just simply don't remember because it's been too long, then you can just search these things online and you'll be able to get your calculations for all the circle. The key one we want for the circle is the area of the circle. See, I know the height that I want, so now I just keep plugging in things that I could times that height by in order to give me a volume that's less than the volume of all these. So I know I can fit it all and have some room to squash it down, but not so small that, you know, it's a very tiny cushion. So I take the 31 centimetres and I just guess and times it by different amounts of area, see what sort of amount I could times it by in order to get the right sort of volume for what I want. Now I can't give you exact figures for this because the height that you're going to want is going to be different. You're going to have different amounts of packing material, and as I'm just using whatever packing material I happen to have because I'm trying to upcycle and recycle as much as possible, you're not going to have the same amount of packing material I have. But for simplicity's sake, let me give you the dimensions that I'm going to be working with. So it's 38 centimetres high, diameter of the circle, so the length across the circle, it's going to be 101, and that's going to be 41 centimetres, and that's going to be important for marking out the size of the circle. Half of that will give you the radius, which is the element that we want to work with, and that means that the circumference of the circle is 128.744 centimetres. Now you don't need to go to that extreme with the decimal places. I just did that because I'm a nerd and not doing the calculations. But we need to know the circumference of the circle because that is going to be the length of the fabric that's going to make up the wall of the cylinder. That is the footrest. So to recap, we want 38 centimetres, 41 centimetres and 128 centimetres around the side. So there are your dimensions. I'll go through those again as we're doing it. But calculate the area of this, calculate the area of the stool that you want, and then we get to sewing. Not much space on my shop floor, so you'll have to bear with me with this. But first measurement we're going to need, the very important one, the 38 centimetres tall, but we're going to want a little bit extra because we're going to need a seam allowance on there. So seam allowance both at the top and the bottom, so whatever your seam allowance is, measuring from the bottom of this material, this is a bit of a curtain, so I'm going to go from the very edge up to 40 centimetres, which allow me 2 centimetres at the bottom and 2 centimetres at the top. that I can use. I do have this little patchwork effect at the one side, and I'm quite happy to take the 2 centimetres of seam allowance into this fabric. So take my tailor's chalk and measuring up, I'm going to go to 40 centimetres all the way along. So 40 centimetre mark is there. Okay, I think last time I did say that I wanted 40 centimetre width. I didn't want it 42, so hopefully Eddie to Bridget managed to catch that. I did cut out 42 centimetre length of fabric, and I've got to mention that the width of these curtains is slightly longer than I want for the circumference of the cylinder that's going to make up the body of the fabric footstool, but it's not that much difference anyway, so I just cut out the entire length and I'll worry about that excess later. Okay, so now we're moving on to making the circles, and these are going to be 41 centimetres in diameter, which is going to be 20.5 centimetres in radius. I'm just going to set my tape measure to 41 centimetres and make sure that I've got enough fabric all the way around there. Taking my chalk, I'm going to mark out the 20.5 somewhere in the centre as a cross, so I know that the point of that cross is the exact point that I'm working with, whereas if I drew a line I wouldn't know whether I'm working from the top of the line or the bottom of the line. Draw a circle, it's more precise but not perfect. You draw a cross, you know the middle of that cross is exactly the point that you're working with. Then measuring from that point, I'm going to do the radius, which is 20.5 in all directions. The more points I put around the outside, the more accurate the circle is going to be, because a circle can be thought of as having an infinite number of corners. And what you will notice is as I'm doing this, I'm not doing any seam allowance on. I will put a seam allowance on there, it's just that I'm, because it's a circle, I want to make sure that I get the perfect circle first, and then I'll worry about putting on the seam allowance, because the seam allowance I can be a bit wibble wobble with it, but this is the bit I need precise. So I'm putting the zip into this, so I've turned it the wrong way around. So this is going to be the outside that's shown to the world, but I'm pinning it and sewing on this side, so it's essentially wrong sides together. And I'm going to sew a zip in this. So zipper foot's on, just going to sew straight stitch down the 2 sides and seal that up. So right sides are on the inside, and then we're going to attach the top. And there we have it, a perfectly sized footstool onto which I can rest my feet after a weary day. So let's just move on to cutting out